Brian Fitzgerald. How are you
Brian,
this evening?
I'm
Which is
very good.
obviously our actual hello, and it's not the hello that we do just after I press record.
No,
Sort of the mock surprise at seeing your face. But how lovely it is. What a
indeed,
lovely thing.
indeed.
Thanks for joining us this evening.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And it
Yeah,
always seems to meander into interesting places. So I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion.
yeah. So I sort of said a bit in our setup, but I'll just say for people watching or listening, is I was thinking about, well, kind of what can I do or how can I respond to this? And to everything that's going on. And I thought to myself that, the power of story is to bring people together. And that's what has been, more than the mythology, more than the, I don't know, emotional insight is just that fact of togetherness. And so what I've done is, so I thought I wanted to talk about the stuff that's going on in everyone's heads, right? And I thought I'd do that with people whose insight I value and whose company I value, and we could have a kind of public conversation about private things.
Mm.
And I think it's that, maybe it's that intimacy in public that people are missing, is that public life at the moment is so like vast and massive and chaotic. There's got, or people are like solution finding or proposing ridiculous theories for why what might be going on is going on, and the middle space is like, I'm actually going through this. How's it for you?
Yeah.
And to not have to do that one-to-one over a Zoom call or something like that. So this is that kind of public-private interlude that we're doing. And I got some questions in from people, which is nice. It's just like the community sharing what they're thinking and how they're feeling. And I thought it might sort of soothe people and sort of just get a sense of the commonality around what we're going through.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear, just as a starter, how you are.
Yeah, I'm well. And I was thinking this morning, it feels in some way like Mother Earth has just pushed this pause button and said, slow down. And I'm, you know, I'm cherishing an awful lot about things like bird song in the morning that I'm paying attention to or I'm hearing differently. Um, it feels like there's been that mad frenetic pace of the dailiness of life and things rushing towards the next thing and the next project and all that. It's just we've been forced to just slow it down. And I think that in that space, that's the kind of space where the depths sort of bring up what's important and you start to sort of imagine what really matters in your life. And for me in particular, I'm very much an at-risk sort of person from the coronavirus. So all kinds of reflections on mortality and all that stuff is just a natural sort of consequence of them. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that has been sharpening my sense of what I value and what I want to hold and what I want to experience. And I'm grateful for that, I have to say. And
Healthy
I'm
sense of mortality.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. And I'm extremely lucky. I'm in a good place. I have a roof over my head. I have a garden, and we have this splendid Amsterdam weather that's been incredible for a month now. And I think that all makes this experience much more tolerable. And there's parts of it that I actually adore and I love. And I think I've been, as you know, an environmental activist and sort of having a lover's quarrel with the world for many decades now. and I feel like this is an incredible gift, an incredible opportunity that this crisis is giving us to really, on a meta scale, on a social scale, think about what matters and what we've been doing. And I don't know if you saw that fantastic Arundhati Roy article. She wrote about what's happening in India, which is horrendous in terms of the coronavirus, the suffering there, and that's what's going on. But she described this virus as a portal. She said it's it's a gateway between the world that was and the world that's going to be. And we have this choice of whether we're going to drag the carcass of what used to be through that portal, or if we're going to think about remaking it anew. I just love that. I think it's a
Wow.
beautiful concept.
Well, there is that
And
intensity, isn't it? Like, it's just like everything that was sort of way out there is just being brought right here, and it's become so personal. Sort of the global has come personal. It's just
yeah,
I have to mention your own article that you put up on Medium, saying that COVID is climate change and fast forward.
yeah, yeah,
And it seems that we can't. Everywhere I go, people are just making this pattern. Like this is the environment. This is, as you even said, like this is Mother Earth kind of just going. Listen, there was some important stuff, and you're not paying attention. So this is kind of going to make you.
Yeah, it's an existential threat that's at our doorstep, and I think it's just so much more tangible when you're looking at mortality that's immediate and right there, rather than in some distant future, which climate change isn't actually, but it's easy to imagine that. And for me, I think there's also this just massive lesson in the importance of we elect people and we create governments to look after us, and protect us. And that sacred mission, I think, may have been lost over the last few decades in the sort of neoliberal imagining of the market will take care of everything. We just leave it to consumer choice and that was just not an adequate response to the existential threat of the coronavirus, and it's not an adequate response to the existential threat of climate change or the food crisis or anything that we're facing out there. So I think it's a great wake-up call. It's a tremendous sort of like, hey, pay attention. You create governments and elect people to protect you, and somehow you're going to have to remind them of that fact and go back to that sort of sacred mission that becomes so much more important now.
Yeah. I've got this image in my head. Is one of my favorite stories is Io, the rape of Io.
Yeah.
And in that rape, there's a flip because Io gets done over by not one but two gods at the same time, and it maybe we feel like we're going through something which is like all the gods are just kind of doing us over at the moment. And Zeus rapes Io, and I had this sense of the injury, the depth of the injury that was done at that point. And there's nothing, like she's lying on the ground, there's nothing she could do, and Zeus like tries to hide the fact and turns her into a cow, right? Turns her into a cow. But it is Hera who has the genius to take that wide open grief and pain and then bring it to something manageable, which is the stinging fly. And it's the stinging, so she puts a stinging fly on her, and that makes her run to Hades. But before she got the fly, she couldn't do anything. She was just in grief and in pain and all this. And it was the intensity of the piercing pain like that actually led her on the journey that eventually healed her. And the more I tell that story, the less I see Hera as the aggressor, but actually gave her what she needed to conjure healing out of this trauma that she had been inflicted on her.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I just immediately map the fly to the coronavirus and that sort of tiny little impetus, that tiny little annoyance, the tiny little bite that just magnified into a call to action. Yeah.
exactly. And then attached to that little nip is just the entirety of the ecosystem. And then you tie that to the idea of what there's a friend called Tim Russell, I've known for a few years. He posted that it's the belief of Tibetan medicine that a virus is a signal from the natural system
Mm.
to rebalance. It is like the virus is the signal from the natural system. And then you hear that this was, well, and then the virus comes from bats, which were, and probably pangolins, which were being traded in Chinese markets. And you're just like, you can't, you couldn't map it any more closely. It's like, that's a beautiful image. Yeah. And we don't know if, does Mother Nature have her own personality? But then you map it against the science and it describes a beautiful arc of causality,
Yeah.
before science was in place.
And the pangolin, what a shame. What a great animal, the pangolin. It's just gorgeous. I don't want to think illy of badly of the pangolin ever.
And also for purposes of comedy, apart from anything else. I mean, the pangolin is just so glorious. Like they're so odd. They're so odd. We need them. But I'm interested in, so this comes back, is this sense, okay, here's an opportunity for change. You talked about Arundhati Roy. But then what are the changes people are making on a personal level that could radio into? What are the things you're encouraged by that people are doing that
Yeah.
could lead to something bigger?
Well, one thing I've been encouraging is for people to tune out of the conventional media and start looking at things like the hashtag Corona Kindness on Twitter, and it's a wonderful website called the Coronavirus, and Karuna in Sanskrit apparently is compassion, and it's just a amalgamation of all these acts of incredible bravery and generosity and kindness that people are doing in response to this crisis. And I wonder, and I'm constantly amazed at the sort of creativity and the empathy and the generosity that you can see. It's a bit like gratitude journaling in some ways.
Right.
If you start a gratitude journal, you train this radar to be paying attention to what you're grateful for and things that make you happy, because you're going to have to journal it. And I find it's very subtly rewires your imagination. And I think it's a shame that you have to dig for it. I think you have to work harder to find those stories, because I think the natural tendency of the human brain is to pay attention to the threat. And of course, in these times, we're going to be our news media is going to be telling us about the horrors and the inhumanities and the hoarding of toilet paper and these things that seem selfish and all that. But I think Rebecca Solnit wrote an entire book about the response to the earthquakes in California and what that did to the community and people's sense of togetherness and how they helped each other. And I think that's tremendously positive, that there's this reignition of the sense of heroism, real heroism, from from not from our politicians and leaders, but from from everyone around us, from the community itself, from the community up. And I think
That could be very fundamental. I mean, you said that people are getting a reset on what they consider government to be. But I think it's like we're done with the idea that the government is the answer. And I don't mean that from I promise any progressive listeners out there, I don't mean that from a libertarian standpoint, which is valid on its own merits, I suppose. But it's that sense of sovereignty within us and around us, is that my life is not the national politics. It's connected So my thorny question to you, Brian, is what is the edge between? So you're talking about um, yeah, finding the kindness and the gratitude and resetting the radar about what's important. But how then do you maintain a sense of responsibility and engagement in the national politics? Because it's the filmmaker Adam Curtis made this, yeah, he made this argument. Yeah, I know. He said that it was the artistic movement in the 1970s, or the left from the 60s, turned into artists, and they exhibited this quality of ironic coolness, and it was that ironic coolness that meant them they withdrew. They just dropped out, like even more than the hippies. They just took themselves out of the equation and was like, it's about aesthetic and attitude and what you carry inside. And he made the argument that it was that idea that gave rise to Reaganism. And it gave rise to, there are a few steps in between, but it's this idea of like fixation only on the self and not a wider responsibility of community.
Yeah.
So I hear a lot now, people are going, yeah, the most productive thing is just stay in your own boundary, be with your people. But that's also not good enough.
No, and I don't think that's all we're seeing either. You know, the tremendous outpouring of artistic sort of creativity and generosity of you know, donating music and going out there with unpolished stuff and throwing it. I think it's an expression of the community and the networkedness and the connectedness that we're all sharing. And I feel I know what Adam Curtis is saying there, but I think it's the wrong, and I think it's an accurate description, but I think it's the wrong response, and I think it's no longer an adequate response, and I don't think it will continue to be the response of art. And
which response do you mean?
To be solely about the individual, to pull into the inward reflection. I feel like there's just tremendous artistic responsibility, and I think it's been felt for some time, and I think many artists have risen to the challenge of saying, we're in a time period where there are these stories that are battling for what is the true description of humanity? What is the true description of society? Are we the zombie apocalypse, self-interested horrors that are going to roam the streets and kill one another for a piece of bread, or are we the community that stands together and generously risks each other's lives to save each other and to protect our elders? And I think the picture is actually it's more and more contingent on art to tell that more rounded picture of the human spirit, when the media in particular is always going to be focusing on, if it bleeds it leads, and the negative, and that picture that goes to our reptile brain and says threat, 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 pay attention, evil all around you, danger all around you. And that was an appropriate response when we were an animal in the savannah with not very good claws and not very good teeth, but it's really not an appropriate response when we are a community of people around the world who have the capacity to look after each other, feed each other, protect the earth that we live on. And that's all tremendously within our grasp. So I feel there's a need to art to kind of step up and sort of rewire the story of who we are. And this is something that you've always done beautifully. Remind us of our community. And when you step into a room and tell a story, what was moments ago 12 strangers is suddenly 12 people who know who one another is, because our hearts have been warmed by this incredible tale, this incredible art that you're doing, and which is, subtly playing on values and saying, this is who we are, this is what matters to us, this is, let's hear this story about,
Yeah.
this amazing tale. And yeah, and that community is everything. It's the most powerful thing on the planet. And we can.
You said only our humanity can save only our humanity can save humanity.
Yeah.
And that's the choice, isn't it? It's like, what do you jump into? And it's
Yeah.
so stark. I mean, I've got like, I don't mind sharing publicly, but I mean, I've got no work on, and that sense of, the immensity of that problem is actually just pushing me not into where's my next paycheck, but I'm going to do things of value. I'm going to make the relationships that matter. I'm going to, serve the community of people who used to come to storytelling. Like, we're just going to through these conversations. And weirdly, I think that's the best economic bet I can do, is just keep throwing out the lines, all this kind of stuff. It's if I go into survival mode, number one, I'm not enjoying myself, but number two, I can't see it, the value is that small.
Yeah.
Whereas economically, if you look around the next 4 years, just widening my community, doing the stuff I love, just sort of keep walking around, offering, that's probably gonna, get some momentum going. So like, one kind of serves the other.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the level of momentum that we can build up as a society, in that, like, it's like the cage came up and we all just looked around and went, okay, so we're talking about one experience of humanity. There are people having horrific situations with, if you're a medical staff, if immense pressure, loss of life, and we had a medical situation in my family as well, and we really lived. It was mild, but we really lived through it. But you do hear again and again this sense of, as you were saying, like, I get the chance to enjoy the birds singing, and I've been enjoying the sunshine. I wonder what the response would have been if the weather had been worse.
Yeah.
I'm interested in, like, as we're discovering in this slowness, is there a critical momentum that we can build up, that when the chance of a paycheck comes, are we going to hit the deadline, or are we going to take just that breath to kind of just to, like, breathe in the world that we're living in, to go for that walk? Are we going to actually prize that slowness to such an extent that we're going to make that in the lead now, instead of, oh, it's 9:00, get down to work, I'm not going to read poetry or read a book.
Yeah, and I mean, so much depends on, how much we rewrite the idea of what's normal. And it's incredible how quickly the idea of the normality of a mask in public, or not shaking hands, these just centuries old traditions can shift like that in the face of something this big. And it feels to me like, there's I heard one of the late night comedians the other day talking about, I just can't wait to get back into my daily commute traffic jam. And who does want to go back to that? If we have a chance to sort of rethink what is important, and slow down. It just seems like a great invitation to really, really take a step back and think what's important in our lives. And is this you were talking earlier about Reaganism, and I was talking to a friend about well, about neoliberalism and Maggie Thatcher and her famous "There is no such thing as society," and
Mm.
it just seems that this is the perfect illustration of there is nothing but society. You know, it's so much more important to be looking at our family and connections and our health. And health is wealth right now. It's not the GDP and job growth. It just doesn't feel satisfying in the face of what we're looking at now. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the size of the shock, isn't it? Is that it has flipped us into another mode.
Yeah.
Um, I think for like that idea of, when you by looking at the sunshine, is not that. I think in the previous kind of paradigm was that you're either pro capitalism or not. You're either pro earning or not. You either you choose your income or not. And we've got this possibility. Is that the idea of like going and looking at like seeing the morning breeze or listening to the birds song? Is that it's not that you're not going to go away and do your job, but you're just going to see it in its proper context.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah.
And so that's when you talk about there's nothing but society, is that what we need is, and I'm gonna flip on my economic switch because I did study it. I loved, and the guy that brought me alive more than anything else is Karl Polanyi, who wrote The Great Transformation. I never read Marx, but I read Karl Polanyi as a student. And Karl Polanyi said that his thing, like, man is a social animal, and that the birth of the market system caused society to become disembedded. Sorry, the economy to become disembedded from society.
Mm.
It's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
I just expand that a little bit for folks. So it's the idea that the economy throughout history was the social structure. You had the king and the priest. So those are social roles. And the economy broadly followed that conversation between the king and the priest, and then a knight class, around it. And then maybe, priest, shaman, same thing. And so society followed that, but then the movement of goods followed those very clearly defined social roles. And suddenly the market, it was the birth of the enclosures. So when all the land was parceled up and sold off, and suddenly land stopped being land and started becoming property, and the means of exchange was no longer like actual physical goods, but little like pieces, and then it was paper. All these things meant that we became out of contact of the real economy. And he used this word disembedded. The economy at that moment, moment that sort of went for the sort of transition of 200 to 300 years.
Right.
That was when society started following the economy.
Yeah. I mean that resonates for me with Kate Raworth's wonderful Donut Economics, where she talks about the value that society doesn't recognize in, for instance, the work that a homemaker, a housewife does at home, and the fact that when Adam Smith was writing that the baker does not provide bread out of the goodness of his heart, nor the butcher ply his trade, that he was writing that at home while his mother was cooking his meals for him, and he completely ignored that economic value in the same way that the market ignores the value of that voluntary workforce, which is done for the goodness of people's hearts.
Just to jump in there, is what you're saying is Vandana Shiva makes the point that in Nigeria, 50% of the population provide 95% of its nutritive needs.
Yeah.
Because people have started home gardening
Right.
in the economic crisis. And that's not in the GDP figure.
No. And the cost of resource extraction and all of that is not built into in the prices of the commodity. So the market was long sort of detached from the earth, and we're paying the price for that now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've got this sense that it's not my idea at all. Like, it's been given to me, and I just feel it's really true. But like, that aesthetic appreciation of the world
Mhm.
brings us into contact. I think that is in itself medicine.
Yeah.
And that poem that you have taught me to love, I went out into the Hazel Wood because a fire was in my head. Right?
Mm.
And it is that sense that we've got to keep putting out the fire. We need to drink in these images, these that are just outside the door of life living itself.
Yeah.
And like, this reset that we've been given has to rebase our habits. And it does start with like local micro appreciation. And the systemic change will have to come out of that. I've no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like the row that you hoe, the treasure trove of wisdom in story and myth is
Mm.
just, it's something that's got to be there to help us through times like this, because ultimately every story is about overcoming an obstacle or an enemy. And yeah, we're facing a pretty daunting set of obstacles right now, and it feels like those old stories that remind us that we we can, and that we have, and that they're containing all those little pointers about what's right and what's true and what's possible. Just I feel like we need to surround ourselves with those right now.
Yeah. It's fertilizer, isn't it? It's fertilizer. This
And I
is
think
something we were talking about the other day on the phone. Was so the cry that is often, it often comes my way, and I see it round and about, is like, we need the story that's going to take the world to a better place.
mm,
And actually, if you look around, like, we have quite a lot of stories. I don't know if you switched on Netflix recently, but like, or if you've been on YouTube recently, like, there's a lot of narratives around. And it's not the abundance of stories, it's actually the listening to them that needs to change.
yeah, and I think it's also you know, in some ways, an erosion of the underlying myths of, um, or the mythology of the stories that explain how the world works. And you know,
Right.
when I do story workshops, we talk a lot about these myth gaps that open up when stories that comfort us to explain the world to us stop making sense. And the example we've always used is the American dream, and how I watched my father live the American dream. His grandfather packed up everything, his father rather packed up everything from Ireland and went to the United States, believing that it was this land of opportunity, um, and that that he was going to be welcomed with open arms, and given the opportunity to work hard and become fabulously rich, because it's a very sort of capitalist dream, the American dream. But then when the banks collapsed in 2008, that stopped making sense. And suddenly, people had lost everything. And the idea that the bankers were being bailed out with billion-dollar um, golden parachutes just totally chipped away at it. And
Yeah.
so whenever you got that, as you know, when you've got an absence of story, there's nothing the human brain hates more than the absence of story, and something's going to rush in to take its place. And the 99%, the 1% came rushing in, and Make America Great Again came rushing in and filled that gap. And I think we're watching right now another fissure opening up, and I think it's got something to do with the um, how we as human beings protect ourselves and protect our future, and how much we invest in that versus how much we invest in our economy. And I think there's a real tension. I think there's a real story war going on right there
Yeah.
for what's the real explanation of our world.
I'm just responding to that. There's this, with that tension of these sort of two-sided. Biologists have found, as I've found out through Fritjof Capra, that the property of every natural system is there are forces of integration and forces of assertion. Every natural system needs these for survival. Assertion and integration, right? So you break that down into the political debate, and you've got Make America Great Again, boom, and hey, can we just take a minute because I need to find out what my humanity is. And you know what I mean? And like, because the assertion is the answer, and that's quicker, so that's going to grab the imagination much quicker. And the integration idea of like, hey, I'm like, all this stuff's been happening, and I just need to find out where I am in this world, and what is humanity, and what are we here to do. That conversation is not, it's not happening quick enough. That sense of like that necessary inquiry, is that we don't have enough for that myth gap, or like we don't have enough for it to reach a wider group of people. I don't know if it comes down to the sense of, because of the psychological structure, is that, the reptilian brain is about survival, and where's the threat, and how can I survive, and the mammalian brain is about care and looking after each other, the limbic. But the limbic shuts down. The reptilian can shut down the limbic if it's not strong enough. If there's not enough care, then the reptilian can survive. Right? I don't know. How do we? What's the bridge? I mean, is it just like, if the evidence of kindness is just so persuasive that more people hop into that?
The human spirit lives in that spark of doubt that we are right. I've always loved that as a sort of orientation. And I think, I look at the politicization of an awful lot of the debate right now, and it feels like that's, in some ways, it's like trying to hold on to a sense of normalcy by holding on to those stories. I want to look at everything through the lens of Brexit. I want to look at everything through the lens of Trump. I want to look at everything through, my old comfortable pair of glasses, because they're really important right now. And yet, realistically, I loved another point in the Arundhati Roy article, was she's saying, what doctor isn't now quietly praying for a miracle, and what priest isn't perhaps quietly obeying the dictates of science? That scrambling of normality in those particular roles. I would love to see a scrambling of normality in our political radar as well, or our insistence on politicizing everything. That, and this may just be a perspective of paying more attention to British and American sort of politics and discussion around response to the virus, but it just seems that it's there's not enough setting aside of those political filters and those political radar, and simply looking at, what do we need as a species, as a community, as human beings to get through this.
Yeah, one of my favorite articles was from the Financial Times, where they were trying to gauge the level of economic drop-off, and their basic thing was like, we have no idea how to measure what is happening right now. And so they were looking at things like minutes on the phone and like electricity usage and these things that give us a sense of economic activity, but we can't. They're just like we can't measure this. This is so big and it's so deep. GDP is just like, you know, it's like English in the middle of a Greek village. You know, we won't get the point across anymore. I wanted to I was put this book by Jan Blake. Do you know this?
I don't know that. I was reacting simply because I was just listening to Jan Blake tell her story of the hunter in the boy who wanted to become a great hunter. Wow.
I know. It's so good.
It's absolutely great.
I know. Jan, my previous guest, of course. And I think it was after that conversation, she said there are no non-white writers about storytelling. No non-white person has written a book on storytelling.
Huh.
So that's powerful, right?
Yeah.
And then she went, oh, except for this one, The Mystery Feast.
Okay.
And I just wanted to see if I can. Yeah. Should I do it a bit longer or shorter? How's your appetite?
Longer.
Okay. This is Ben Okri. There is nothing that expresses the roundedness of human beings more than storytelling. Stories are the highest technology of being. There is in story the greatest psychology of existence, of living. Yeah, the greatest psychology of existence, of living. Indeed, there is in story something semi-divine. The nature of story itself is linked to the core of creation. Oh. Story belongs to the micro moment after the Big Bang. It belongs to the micro moment after let there be light act of creation. We live in a time in which we are being told that the main things of value are the things of science and the things of technology. Our lives are being compressed into this technological reality. But it is worth remembering the many-sidedness of being human. Great evils befall us when we restrict ourselves to just one side of our being.
Oh, gorgeous.
Isn't that amazing?
That's lovely.
And that's the thing, is like the economic part, Homo economicus, that is us. You know, bring him in, put him under your wing. That is part of us. And it's, of course, it's necessary to look after material needs.
Yeah.
But don't lose the wider conversation of, you know, yourself and others, yourself with yourself, and yourself with the earth. And in fact, human, the root of the word human, is the same as the word humus, you know, the soil. So in Proto-Indo-European, that's the word for earth. So the root of the word human is earth. Like, that is us. That is the realization of our kind of true life, is with as the earth lives. You know?
And you have that wonderful Walt Whitman, do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I am vast. I contain multitudes. And it always reminds me also of Maya Angelou, who I had the privilege to see speak once, and what a speaker, absolutely amazing. And, you know, she was telling the story of how all of us, you know, I cannot remember it was a Greek philosopher that she was quoting, as saying, you know, I am human. Nothing that is human can be separate from me. And she wove it into the story about how every one of us, yes, has a Hitler in our heart, but we all have a Bach as well. And, getting those two in balance and speaking to each other and accepting each other is the art of being human. You know?
Mm. It was Bob Dylan's new song, indeed. As I Contain Multitudes.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you had a listen to it? Have you heard his new track?
I have. I love it. But the one I truly loved was the 17-minute Murder Most Foul on the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
I could not stop listening to that. It well, it ripples through. I mean, I'm old enough that I actually remember that day, November 1963, when Kennedy was shot, and it is seared in my memory.
How old were you then?
I was 5 years old.
Oh, wow. 5 years old. And you can remember it just.
Because I remember my mom being in tears. It was my mom's stress more than anything. I remember the tiny television on which, we were sort of watching this unfold, and yeah, it was heart wrenching. It was absolutely heart wrenching. And but the way that Dylan just turns that into, yeah, that gorgeous sort of just rolling list of of music and period pieces. Yeah, so much respect for that man.
He's got his mojo back.
Yeah.
I haven't loved any of his modern work. I know some people do, but I don't like want to listen to any of his stuff after about 1980 really.
Oh well, I'm a diehard fan, but
no, I know, but I've never been a diehard fan. But I like, if I listen to him, I listen to like the classics, probably up to Blood on the Tracks, really. But
well, my favorite album of all time. But I heard a wonderful, somebody posted this question of, this sudden outpouring by Dylan is wonderful, but is this, Murder Most Foul his swan song? And it was Nick Cave, actually, in his newsletter, which I think you got me to subscribe to. I absolutely adore. And, Nick's response was, I hope it's not, but I don't think it's a bad thing to appreciate every work of art as if every work of art is the last thing you're going to hear.
Yeah, he's good like that, Cave. He does those good flips, doesn't he? Yeah, his that thought crossed my mind. I thought, okay, Bowie started releasing, and then Leonard Cohen, it wasn't that far out of line what he'd been doing, but it was unbelievably good.
Yeah.
What You Want It Darker is just, I mean, that is just a guy raining down prophecy.
Yeah.
And actually Bowie was the same, and it was all like it was jazz, wasn't it?
Yeah.
His Black Star was beautiful.
Yeah.
Just tangling jazz thing.
Yeah.
And now you've got Bob Dylan, who's refound his inner bard, just reeling off beautiful streams of music and like lyrics just coming out of him, and you just think, maybe that's this kind of like the last words to creation. Maybe it's a trend. We've got a couple more years for the great Bob. I hope not. I don't wish it on him. I hope he enjoys many more years of life.
Yeah. And I think, in all those cases, certainly in the case of Cohen and the case of Bowie, they knew their end was near, and that incredible focus of facing your death and knowing that there's still stuff to be done. I think it's just a courageous response, and I think it's a fractal image of what, as a society, we're looking at right now. It's like, death has come to visit, and it does make you listen to the bird song, and it does make you sort of gain a new appreciation of the dailiness of life, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
So someone whose surname I forget, but I can you tell you his name's Giles.
Hmm.
Um, he said he referred to something that Hannah Arendt wrote. Is that the great mistake of humanity is that we refer to ourselves as mortals.
Ooh, interesting.
Mortals. So we define ourselves as things that die.
Hmm.
She said, and maybe this is actually what Giles said himself. He said that if we're mortal, everything is done before an end. But what happens if we become natals? Yeah. What happens if we are things that come into the world?
Wow.
And he said, might that not stop the rushing around? Might that not make us more protective of what's valuable and not hurrying to get stuff done because the axe is going to fall?
That is brilliant. That's really, really, really interesting. And it, it weaves back immediately in my mind to something else that Hannah Arendt said in Winter, Friendship, and Guilt. Wonderful book. Um, about it was about the human, uh, that the humans are powerless in the face of time, except for the fact that we have two capacities. One is forgiveness, and the other is the ability to make promises. And forgiveness is the way that we undo the immutability of the past, and promises are the way we undo the unpredictability of the future.
Wow.
Mm.
Do you find yourself promising things to yourself during this time? Are you committing to things, or maybe not haven't made a firm one, but do you find yourself going, after all this, if there is an after? I think I don't think it's funny how it's not really going to get back to normal. Things have just changed. But
Well,
do you find yourself making what do you say?
I hope it gets back to better.
Yes, back to better. But do you find yourself making personal promises or commitments to a way that you want to live?
Mm, I find I'm sort of taking every day as it comes right now. I feel in some ways it's a good question, because I'm certainly introducing routines and disciplines into my daily life to just try to sort of organize the time, maybe get some sense of control over time. Um, and my sense of the importance of paying attention to the positive stories of human nature is definitely becoming a discipline that I think is going to carry on beyond this time. I think that's something I'm taking great joy in and finding really important.
Hmm.
But I think, the idea of the after right now feels very strange and very unknown. And I, I, I feel like we haven't hit the bottom of the shift in normalcy yet. And so my sense of what we come out of this looking like, or what the world looks like as we come out of this, is still unformed. And I think that's a good thing, because I think that's a good chance to form it. But um, how successful the status quo is in clawing back its status as the status quo,
Hmm.
I think is uncertain, and I think is making great attempts to do that. But yeah, I don't. I have a very clear picture of what I would like to see, sort of all of us dragging through the portal or stepping through the portal into, and leaving behind. But yeah, it's not. I don't have a clear picture of what it, it will be. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it gave like a lot of people space to dream, but you know, the 2008 financial crisis did that too.
Mm,
I remember the years around 2011, 2012. There was so much dreaming going on.
mm,
I remember being, and it could have just been this stage of life I was in, but I was at the hub in Amsterdam. It's now called the Impact Hub, and this was um, this idea that there was such a thing as a social economy or a purpose-driven economy, is that, you know, that the economy can be re-embedded, is that
yeah.
we can look after our income and we can also be doing stuff that is is sort of to adapt, repurpose a phrase that is pro-life in the
Mm,
proper sense of the word, is that we can align the economy with the
yeah.
workings of the planet. And this is also the principle of donut economics, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
Kate Raworth.
Yep.
And I remember people got super visionary. We were just dreaming the new world. You know, like, yeah, an organization should be there for itself. Any organization should be there because it serves a deeper human purpose,
Mm,
and that has to be, you know, that cannot only be an economic purpose. It has to serve something like in the depths of humanity and earn money. That was the,
mm,
and I think the best thing that we achieved was getting the message out there. And then I think we found that that message was maladapted,
mm,
and that it didn't, you know, change the inner workings of the machine, you know,
mm,
or it wasn't strong enough to people to realize that they're more than the machine.
mm.
And, you know, the shock now is sharper, it's heavier, it's hitting us so much bigger, because it's not an economic shock, it's a humanity shock, you know. But I have to say, I don't have any optimism about a global shift. I don't. I can, to the extent that, not that I think we're all going to hell in a handbasket. I just, every time we turn the page and think we'll learn from this.
Mm.
You know, someone said, you know, 1945, the world must never do this again, and guess what? We're heading there pretty quick. You know, so I don't know. Like, maybe it's better to not be hopeful.
Mm. You know, I stumbled across Cornell West, who I hadn't discovered until yesterday.
Oh,
Um,
really? Yeah, he's brilliant. Firebrand, yeah.
Someone had put an email signature of his quote, "Justice is what love looks like in public," and that had snagged my attention, just sort of stuck to my socks like burdocks.
Yeah.
And I sort of woke up sort of thinking about it this morning, and then I Googled it to find out who'd said it, and it was him. And I just got lost in his wonderful sort of way of thinking and his beautiful, beautiful words. And you know, he has this great phrase riffing off of what you were just saying of, you know, I'm not sure I describe myself as an optimist, but I am a prisoner of hope. And
Oh, that's good.
I, yeah, I feel, I don't know, I do feel hopeful about a shift. I really do. And it may be my perpetual hippie naivety, which is still with me, but I, I don't think we can go through this in the same way that um, an individual can't go through a you know a diagnosis, a lethal diagnosis, and not be, you know, profoundly changed. I think it's got to change us in some ways, and even if it's just a little bit at the edge. I have I have my hopes. I think there's a confluence of voices coming together. You know, Greta Thunberg, I think, is just sort of tumbled around in our zeitgeist, and the fact that this virus is tumbling around in the same sort of territory of wake up, folks, pay attention. Um, you know, there's a there's a there's a wolf at the door, and we have the capability to turn him away, and
Yeah.
we could ride a different wolf.
I love these conversations because you go from natals and mortals,
Mhm.
love and justice, and the
Mhm.
sense of do things ever change.
Mhm.
And we've got a poem right here that just popped into my head and then happens to just tie up all those bases. Brian Fitzgerald, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm just going to click stop at the end of this. Ladies and gentlemen, you can find Brian at dancingfox.com, where he is on the front lines of changing the narratives that are bringing the new world into being. He's also a great friend of mine, and this has been a pure pleasure for me. I hope it has been for you too. And I'm just going to read this Heaney poem as a kind of to send you to your beds, send you to your solitary contemplation. I hope this has been in some way a nice offering for you. This is from The Cure at Troy by Seamus Heaney. Human beings suffer. They torture one another. They get hurt and they get hard. No poem or play or song can fully right a wrong, inflicted or endured. The innocent in jails beat on their bars together. A hunger striker's father stands in the graveyard dumb. The police widow in veils faints at the funeral home. History says, don't hope on this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme. So hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge. Believe that a further shore is reachable from here. Believe in miracles and cures and healing wells. If there's fire on the mountain, or lightning and storm, and a God speaks from the sky, that means someone is hearing the outcry and the birth cry of new life at its term. And we got fire on the mountain right now, right? There's definitely fire on the mountain. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. We'll
Thank
see
you.
you soon.
All right. Take
Bye.
care.